rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events, this is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick Thomas. And I want to say a shout out, of course, to all of the Whiskey Warrior P1s. All of the Whiskey Warrior P1s and any guests who may show up in the stream. Welcome to everyone. I do appreciate you being here. I appreciate your support. And, of course, hopefully you'll learn and be entertained here on the show, because that's what I strive for. And it seems that my program that I usually use to do my audio only portion, it keeps failing. I don't know why, but it does. Anyway, not a problem. We'll just get that figured out at another time. It's not a big deal. I can still, nobody ever listens to the audio directly anyway, so not a problem. It's usually the after folks that are listening on iHeartRadio and stuff like that. Okay, let's go ahead and get things kicked off here with a rousing rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance by our very own Coco Domingue and her sons, Sean and Cam. Now, Sean, just to let everybody know, Sean is autistic. He is usually nonverbal, but he does join in with some of the words, and then he goes to a vocal sound. So it's not a problem, nothing to worry about. That's just Sean expressing his excitement over the pledge in the greatest country that we call home. So, if you are of mind, please stand. Remove your hats if you have one. And also, do me a favor as well and put your hand over your heart. Join in with Coco, Cam, and Sean in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and I thank Coco, Cam, and Sean, can't forget those three, for doing the Pledge of Allegiance for us tonight. That is fantastic. And if you would like to get your version of the Pledge of Allegiance on the show, please record yourself doing the Pledge of Allegiance, and then, of course, send it off to fans, F-A-N-S, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans, F-A-N-S, at AmericanPerspective.online, and I will get you into the rotation, of course. All right, let's go ahead and discuss the Institute on the Constitution really quickly here. The Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission: to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following three key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.americanperspective.online, which will dump you right to here. It will take you right to the Constitution's website. So use my affiliate link, iotc.americanperspective.online to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.americanperspective.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.americanperspective.online. Or if you want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, go to constitution.americanperspective.online. And for those of you, I just want to say, for those of you that think that I don't have a youngest whiskey warrior, let me just point this out to you, because I do have one. And here he is right here. Now, granted, he is young, so I blurred out his face, so don't worry, that's not a scary thing that you're looking at, but there he is in front of the actual Declaration of Independence in Washington, D.C., that is, the actual Declaration of Independence, and he's holding, of course, the Constitution, Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution that he used to pass his civics exam. That's him right there, all in his splendid glory. In fact, he is actually, he and his troops are doing a color guard this weekend, I'm told. So I checked in with his dad, and that's what he told me. He sent me a couple of things. But anyway, so go to constitution.americanperspective.online and get this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution that has a 100-year warranty against materials and workmanship defects. It has 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather internally wrapped around pages that are tear and water resistant. And look at that binding. It is an actual stitched binding, not glue like what some companies have. This is a fantastic, fantastic thing to pass on down the line. Go to constitution.americanperspective.online and get yours today. And I thank them for allowing me to be an affiliate. All right. So let's get on with the... I accidentally shut something down that I probably didn't want to, but oh well, it happens. All right. So let's get on with the fact that Biden claims to love the troops, claims to love America, claims to do all of these things, but he actually does not. And let me explain to you why he does not. Well, this first article, and as you saw in the title of the video for the show, Biden says no to the troops, but he says yes to Ukraine. He said yes to Ukraine because of the fact that he talked about Ukraine. He apologized to Zelensky just last week about not getting money to them. But yet, here we have, this pops up in town hall, but here we have an opportunity for Biden to show how much he loves the troops. And he says, nope. He vetoed the chance to give our U.S. troops a pay raise, despite spending 7 times more than the pay raise was expected to be on Ukraine. Now, I want to point something out to you. In this Constitution, okay, there's this section. It's called Article 1, Section 8. And Article 1, Section 8 has a listing of 18 items that are the responsibility of the legislature to create laws in order to support these 18 tasks. Now, out of these 18 tasks, a full 1/3 of these 18 tasks are directly related to the military of this country, whether it be the Navy, the militia, the funding thereof, so on and so forth. There are 6 individual listed items in that list of 18 in Article 1, Section 8 that are directly related to the military. See, that's what the federal government is supposed to do. The federal government is supposed to defend the states from outside foreign attackers. That's its primary and number one. Well, I guess primary kind of means that, but definitely the number one responsibility of the federal government is to protect these United States from outside attacks. That's it. That's its whole, honestly, that is probably the only thing that really the federal government should do. Now, there are a couple of other things like act as a mediator for the states and, you know, those kinds of things, collect, but the major portion of what they are to do is to defend this country. And that is demonstrated clearly by the fact that a full 1/3 of those items that are listed in Article 1, which covers the legislature, Section 8 is focused on. Now, the thing that is really, really difficult, okay, is in dealing with the fact that these people who are in the military are probably, as my best buddy Steven Stiles talks about, they top the list of people that should be making all kinds of serious money. And I'm not talking about that just from the standpoint of that they should be millionaires going into the service, but their jobs, their whole job is to lay down their lives for us so that we can live free. That's why I keep saying, no matter what happens, when somebody goes into the military, they write the United States government and taxpayers, the people, a check that is payable up to and including their lives. It's these folks that put their lives on the line for you during wartime so that we don't have to go off into war. We are at this point an all volunteer military. Every single one of our branches. We haven't had a draft in many, many years. There is absolutely no reason why the military should not get a pay raise. And what's even worse about this is the majority of the people who were supposed to get the pay raise as a part of this bill were junior level officers and enlisted. That was what it was focused on. But Biden said no. So the House Armed Services Committee draft of the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act. Now, keep in mind, per the Constitution, they can only fund every 2 years. Okay, that is actually written in one of those items that I was talking about in Article 1, Section 8. But the draft of the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act proposed a $24 billion pay raise to the enlisted U.S. service members. Now, the Biden administration said that it strongly opposes approving such a significant and permanent pay raise, citing budgetary constraints. So he's basically saying, well, you know, we can't pay our military, we can't give them a pay raise, which my understanding is the last time that they got a pay raise was something like 8 years ago. But anyway, the point being is that he's like, oh no, we can't give them a pay raise because of the fact that we have budgetary constraints. But at the same time, this jackass went and authorized a large, huge bill that just recently for $61 billion to go to Ukraine. And that on top of a bunch of other bills in the past several years that has come up to a total of $175 billion in aid to Ukraine. This is ridiculous. This is completely ridiculous. This guy is, he's constantly, or well, I should say his freaking intern, because let's face it, Joe Biden is a vegetable and just gone and, you know, has oatmeals for brains. But he essentially would have authorized, if the bill would have gone through, would have authorized $883.7 billion for military functions. Sorry, I meant that $883 million for military functions and $1.2 billion for non-defense activities. It's part of HR 8070. You know what? I think I got that messed up. But anyway, it's HR 8070 would have increased compensation, changed healthcare benefits for U.S. military members and their families, along with extended bonuses and allowances to military personnel. Now, here's part of the problem. Many of these military members are reaching out and using welfare programs under the Bidenomics crap that we are in right now. And they are trying to make ends meet using other government programs because they are not making enough money for this. And this is something that the lawmakers, the Republican lawmakers, lashed out at Biden today, this in the Daily Caller, for refusing to approve this pay raise for the enlisted troops. And the House Armed Services Committee chair and Republican Alabama Representative Mike Rogers said in a statement, "This is offensive and wrong. Republicans and Democrats on our committee agree this is unacceptable. I believe wholeheartedly that the brave Americans who serve in our armed forces shouldn't have to worry about making ends meet. Unfortunately, President Biden doesn't feel the same." Louisiana representative, who was also a Republican, Representative Clay Higgins, told the Daily Caller News Foundation, "Biden is in trouble politically and he opposes traditional American values, including the core principles that were once embraced by the United States military. We desperately need a change in our executive leadership." And this is 100% true. Jim Banks, who's a representative, also posted on X, "Young service members can barely afford to get by in the Biden economy. To make matters worse, the Biden White House just issued a statement strongly opposing House Republicans' pay increase for junior enlisted service members. Shameful." Folks, I don't care what anybody says. I honestly do not care what anybody says. Biden is a straight up anti-military. He is worse than what they even accused Trump of being, but he is straight up anti-military. He is straight up against the armed services. He looked at his watch when he brought back home 13 service members who were killed because of his inadequate withdrawal. And inadequate, by the way, is a very mild statement. Inadequate withdrawal from Afghanistan. He has gone off the deep end when it comes to things like the military itself. He barely has a brain to even rattling around in his head. So I'm pretty sure this is clearly against the or from his administration that are against this. And the fact that they are embracing things like DEI and transgenderism and all these other things that are completely lost in the ranks of the service. Because when I was in the service back in the early 90s, we were told walking in, you leave your skin color at the door. Now, I was in the Army, so the response was, you now bleed Army green. There is no reason to even remotely think. I mean, when you're talking about integration, there's no greater integration than you are part of a team, and that team wears green. There is no other color that you need to worry about. And that's what they taught us in basic training. That's what they taught us. And there was no tolerance for anything like that, any kind of semblance of racism, white nationalism, any other thing that they're claiming that the U.S. military has. There was no tolerance for it. It was a zero tolerance for any of that. Now, reportedly, like I was saying, junior troops and service members with family are struggling to stay afloat as well with their current salaries and afford reasonable housing, the study found. So let's see what the study was. Yeah, so this is a study, a year-long committee study, found that quality of life in the military itself was dropping, especially among the junior troops. Pay level for junior troops in particular had failed to remain competitive with the civilian job market. Junior troops received incremental pay raises or no raise at all in 8 of the last 40 years. Junior troops and service members with family are also struggling to stay afloat, I mentioned. They're having to go to rely on food banks, SNAP, and WIC to put food on the table, according to the Armed Services Republican, or the GOP. This is just horrible. This is exactly why, my dad, God rest his soul, used to always tell me actions speak louder than words. And I got to tell you, this administration, their actions are just absolutely atrocious. You can see by every measure of what they are doing every single day to Americans that they don't like Americans. They don't like American patriots. They don't like American. I can't even think of another word, but they just don't like us. They don't like us. If you don't toe the company line, meaning the Democrat, leftist, Marxist company line, you're not part of them, and they don't want any part of you ever again. This is just disgraceful. This is just disgraceful. And again, this is one of the main things that the government is supposed to do. We should be funding these people. And yes, Coco, they don't like our freedom. That's right. Yeah. Well, there's another sad statistic that kind of tangentially connects to this. There's a study out now. Now, keep in mind, we haven't had any kinds of armed conflicts like we used to. We haven't had very many armed conflicts, even in Afghanistan, by the way, before we had that disastrous pullout. Even in Afghanistan, we were losing less. I think we lost just in the last 10 years of being over there, less than 2,000 troops. So this statistic and story caught my eye, and I'm very concerned about this. This is a Newsmax study. More U.S. soldiers died by suicide than combat. Now, this is a new Pentagon study, reading from the piece, that reveals that U.S. soldiers are almost 9 times more likely to die from suicide than from in the line of fire. A 5-year study by the Defense Health Agency of active duty soldiers from 2014 to 2019 found that 883 died by suicide, 814 deaths were caused by accidents, and 96 died in combat. According to USA Today, suicide figures in that study were collected before the Army and the Pentagon initiated a task force to explore harmful behavior such as alcohol and drug abuse. That, of course, contribute to suicide. However, suicide figures are still on the rise, with 55 soldiers taking their lives so far in 2024. Now, I just want to point something out before I continue with the piece here. When I went into the service, one of the things that they discussed with us as a part of our training and basic training, and again, keep in mind, this is like early 1990, is the fact that the military itself is very stressful. Military life is even in the back, the back command, meaning that you're not out in the field, you're not out in a war zone, can be very stressful because realistically you are constantly doing things on a very high tempo. Your training regimen is high. You have standards that you must have met and keep meeting. I don't know about anymore, but I know that back then there were a lot of standards that you had to keep and meet. Otherwise, you were into trouble. So it was a very high stress kind of environment. And what they did tell us is that the divorce rate in the services eclipsed the divorce rate in the regular civilian world. And the reason a lot of that had to do with the fact of the stress that was involved. You also need to understand, too, that, again, the military members are not making a whole heck of a lot of money. And even if they do take advantage of things like on-post housing and that kind of stuff, which, by the way, wasn't even when I was in, wasn't enough to cover everybody. Oftentimes a young family wouldn't be able to get into post housing because they were, the youngest members on the totem pole, and oftentimes would have to go and find housing in an apartment or something elsewhere. They would get a per diem or something like that that would be given to them, but that wouldn't be enough to cover for the cost of housing in and around the base. And you can just imagine what that change has actually been even today with Bidenomics and the raise in prices and inflation hitting these folks very, very hard. So all of that put together puts you into a very unique situation, because it's not like you can just walk up to your commanding officer and ask for a raise. And it's not like the government and the military is literally making any money, because they're not really producing anything. They're living off the taxpayers, and the taxpayers, if taxes are low in a year, they don't get the same kind of money that they normally, that a normal like private entity corporation might be able to do. These folks, they do so much for our country. They do so much for us, even in peacetime. Just making sure that they are taken care of, I think, is the government's number one responsibility. That's what it's supposed to do. And you can't do that if you're sitting there and saying, no, we're going to spend money on a war that we're not even a part of. We're going to spend more money over there than we are here at home. You know, one thing that I don't see in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, I don't see a single line item that says we have to fund foreign wars that we are not a part of. I don't see one thing in that list. One thing in that list that refers to the fact that we need to be the World Bank for all of these wars. There's not one thing in that list in Article 1, Section 8 that talks about being the support structure for every other country on this planet. That isn't our job. That isn't what the federal government is supposed to be doing. And we're not supposed to be sending taxpayer dollars to go fund these wars. In fact, the very first bullet point, the very first paragraph in Article 1, Section 8 clearly states that Congress should have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. I don't see anything in that first bullet point that says that we're supposed to collect money and money and taxes and so on and so forth to spend it on other people that aren't part of the United States. It doesn't say in the Constitution that we need to be the world's bank or the world's police for that matter. We need to take care of the people that we have here at home first. We need to take care. We're not the welfare for everybody in the world. We need to take care of the people that matter the most to us. And one of them, in my opinion, the top of the list is our military. All right. Enough on that rant. Let me tell you about these wonderful shirts that I wear every single show. And the reason why I'm highlighting them this week is because of the fact that they are running a final week called Freedom Week, running up to Flag Day, which is tomorrow, just for you. They have fantastic specials running all this week. This tonight, or the Thursday deal, I should say, for Freedom Week, is that you get a free gift with your order. Go to theflagshirt.com. That's theflagshirt, all together, all one word, .com, and take a look at their selection. They have a wonderful gift that they are going to give to you for today's only deal for Freedom Week leading up to tomorrow's Flag Day. Of course, they always have free shipping on orders of $75 or more, and you can also get $5 off your order right here from American Perspective by going to flagshirt.americanperspective.online, and you'll be able to pick up a coupon code that you enter into the promo section at checkout for $5 off your order. If you don't want to get the $75, we understand. If you just want to purchase a shirt, get it by using that $5 off coupon code found at flagshirt.americanperspective.online. That's flagshirt.americanperspective.online to get your $5 off coupon at theflagshirt.com. Go there, check them out, and get yourself patriotized. All right. Well, the Biden administration has decided that he wants to weaken our power grid now. Well, we've been talking about this. You and I, we've always been talking about this. We've mentioned it a few times. I've mentioned it on the show. People who in the know that the grid, our power grid, isn't exactly the most secure and the most robust power grid. Just take a look at what happened in Texas during the winter. Just take a look at what happens in California every single year. Brownouts, blackouts, problems, and they want to add more EV or electric appliances and stuff to the grid. Yeah. Well, they're also taking out our reliability, the fuels that we are very reliable for us and provide our base power. This in the Washington Free Beacon, Biden EPA rules will cause blackouts for millions of Americans, study warns. Now, there was a study done by North Dakota, and I'm trying to find by the firm Always On Energy Research. It was conducted in May, and it concluded that the Environmental Protection Agency's recently finalized regulations are not technologically feasible and will foreseeably lead to the retirement of coal power generation units. Intermittent and weather-dependent green energy sources, such as wind and solar, are supposed to replace such retired generators, but that's going to lead to unreliable conditions, the study found. Now, I personally have, by chance in my past history, been gone because, of course, I live in the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest is very into green energy. Hydroelectric is our big claim to fame. But even then, we have aging dams that they are looking at getting rid of. However, during that time, I was able to go to one of our local power companies. I was doing some work on an unrelated issue. And we went ahead and I got on the conversation of the dam. I was up in the dam. I was working there. And so I asked my escort, I was like, hey, how much power does this thing actually put out? And this is literally what he told me. He goes, this cannot compete with a coal or oil-fired or diesel engine plant. As much as the optics of a hydroelectric dam gives to the environmentalists, it can't put out the same amount of power that a fossil fueled, and by that I mean the petroleum, coal, natural gas, those kinds of plants can. In fact, he explained to me that the dam itself oftentimes wasn't even powering anything at all. And that the only time that they ever turned the dang thing on a regular basis was to collect an overflow when the other stuff is running at the time. When the diesel-fired, coal-fired, oil-fired generators go to 100% max capacity, that's when they open up and start running the hydroelectric in order to backfill as an additional source of power. But it's not the primary source. Same thing comes from the wind farms. In fact, there's times people think that, hey, you know what? The wind farms, yeah, when it's really windy, we can turn them on and they'll generate all this electricity. Well, there's actually tolerances with the speeds of the winds. If the wind gets too much, they have to lock the blades in place and not run the wind turbines because it will overclock the gears inside, strip the gears, and cause the thing to essentially catch on fire and blow up. So it can only be run not only just when the wind is blowing, but it can only be run when the wind is at between a range of speeds. If it gets too much, the thing implodes on itself. And here Joe Biden is attempting to aggressively get rid of our most reliable source of energy. Now, the study that came out, back to the piece, largely echoes concerns that have been voiced by the U.S. grid watchdog, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, regional grid operators, and power utility companies. 4 regional grid operators that oversee the infrastructure supplying power for 154 million Americans warned after the EPA regulations were first proposed last year that grid reliability would dwindle to concerning levels under the regulations. The Edison Electric Institute, a lead industry group representing U.S. electric companies in late May, joined a lawsuit that challenged the EPA's finalized regulations. Biden's green agenda. This is North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Now, that name may sound familiar because his name's been floated as VP, possible VP pick for Biden. But Biden's green agenda is shutting down baseload power and is rapidly destabilizing our electric grid. Electricity costs are up 30% under Biden already. This is what he said to the Washington Free Beacon in a statement. Prices will continue to skyrocket if he's reelected as real power demand increases dramatically for the first time in decades. For all of those, now he pulls this out, for all of those chip manufacturing plants and new foundational industries like AI. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yep. Well, hey, you remember those wonderful electrical charging stations that they were going to have, you know, the 500,000 that they were going to place all across the country. And then it comes to find out that here we're like a year or two into it and they've only done 7. Well, here's the reason why. This also in the Washington Free Beacon. White House equity requirements are now holding back the EV charging station construction, according to internal documents. This is after the Biden administration pledged it would build 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations by 2030. It's built 7 so far. And if you recall, there was or maybe you didn't catch this, I don't know, but there was an interview with Pete Buttigieg where the reporter asked the question, or the interviewer asked the question, why has only 7 been built? And, you know, Pete tried to slough it off saying, well, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. We got to work with, you know, local contractors, and there's power that needs to be, you know, power lines that need to be run, and blah, 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 blah. He came up with a whole bunch of other things. But apparently, an internal memo from the Department of Transportation obtained by the Washington Free Beacon, as well as interviews with those who are responsible for overseeing the implementation of the electric vehicle charging station project, say the delay itself is in large part a result of the White House's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. One senior Department of Transportation staffer who spoke on the condition of anonymity said, quote, these requirements are screwing everything up. It's all a mess. President Joe Biden has reportedly expressed frustration at the pace which his much touted infrastructure projects are getting built. Well, I wonder why. It's because of the fact that he's failing in everything else. Oh my gosh. So here we are. We have diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements that are blocking this initiative because apparently they can't get enough diversity hires to build these things. Anyway, Further down, it says, in order to qualify for a grant, applicants must demonstrate how meaningful public involvement, inclusive of disadvantaged communities, will occur throughout a project's life cycle. What public involvement means is unclear, but the Department of Transportation notes it should involve intentional outreach to underserved communities. Okay. Just going to ask this question. It's really, I mean, to me, it's kind of a stupid one, but how many underserved communities are actually going to buy $150,000 at a minimum electric cars? How many underserved communities are going to purchase these very expensive vehicles? Very expensive vehicles that are out there. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think they're going to. I know I'm not, and I'm certainly not in a, quote, underserved community. In fact, the EV market has gotten so slow that GM just announced this in the Epic Times that it's going to cut down electric vehicle output because there's low demand. Well, they're not the only ones, by the way. GM is just one. Ford mentioned it already. Chevy, I think, mentioned it already. And yeah, so there you go. The company ended production of its top-selling Chevy Bolt last year because GM couldn't make any money selling them, said an executive. These vehicles they're not in high demand. They're high priced. And for what you get, people are like, why would I buy a vehicle that could only go maybe 200 miles on a charge? And then it has to sit and like charge for 6 to 8 hours to get a full charge on it. Yeah, I just don't see it. But in here, they talked about, it talks about GM has trimmed down its EV production range for 2024 by 50,000 vehicles, fearing an oversupply due to a softened demand. Industry experts were expecting the EV market to make up 10% of total auto sales. GM actually estimates it at 8%. I think they're overestimating that as well. Anyway, so this green energy boondoggle, lovely thing that's going on here is doing great for the Biden administration. Yeah, part of the problem that we have in terms of like the even with refining and getting any kind of gasoline refined here is the EPA's requirements with regards to the refineries and how the refineries have to run. We haven't had new refineries built in a fairly long time, and the ones that have been built are fairly minimal at best. So that's one issue, and all of that is because of the Environmental Protection Agency. For certain. All right. So one other thing that occurred, well, it constantly occurs. They keep touting the fact that Joe Biden and, ever since Joe Biden has gotten into office, that the crime statistics have been going down. Well, most of us who know better know that the crime statistics are down because some of the biggest cities in this country aren't reporting on it. Well, it's not just us that's noticed, by the way. Here in the Daily Caller, retired NYPD inspector blasts the FBI's crime stats by saying you can't trust these numbers. Retired New York Police Department Inspector Paul Morrow called out Wednesday on Fox News the Federal Bureau of Investigation's recent statistics, claiming that there's been a decrease in crime across the United States. Appearing on Jesse Watters' Primetime to discuss the release of the FBI's new stats, claiming that the rate of violent and property crimes has significantly dropped within the first 3 months of 2024 compared to the same time last year, following a highlight of recent incidences within major cities, Fox host Jesse Watters questioned Morrow if the crime rates are actually down. His response was, no. Simple. All right, so let's just break it down in a very simple way, he says, just from the get-go. 40% of the nation's police departments don't report up to the FBI with their crime numbers. What a coincidence. He says, let's do a roll call. New York, LA, Chicago, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., which is federal itself, he says. None of them report to the FBI. And then he says, what do they all have in common? Well, they're all big blue cities that have high crime rates, and those numbers are not going into the UCR. Yeah. The UCR crime reports of the FBI, so they're not being reported, folks. The crime rate is not accurately depicted because several large cities are not reporting their crimes. Now, it used to be, by the way, that it was a requirement, but the Biden administration actually relaxed that requirement and made it optional. I talked about that on this program not too long ago. And so here we are. We have these cities, these large major cities, every single one of them being a Democrat-run city. As I don't even, I keep running across this. I'm still trying to figure out if there's a major city in this country that is not run by Democrats, that is actually run by Republicans. I know there are states that are run by Republicans, but I can't even think for the life of me off the top of my head any major city in this country that is not run by a Democrat. I can't even think of one. So maybe somebody somewhere in the chat or something might be able to tell me and educate me on this. But as far as I'm aware, there's no major cities that are run by Republican mayors, Republican town councils, whatever. But anyway, all of the big blue cities are just not, they're not reporting. And it was actually just 3, 4, 5 years ago where 90% of all of the cities in the country were reporting, where now we only have roughly 60 to 61% reporting. That's why the numbers are down. And ironically, if you take a look at the actual numbers that are being reported and you factor in the fact that some of the largest cities are not being reported, crime actually isn't that far down, folks. It's not. Because of the fact that the numbers are not proportional to the number of cities that are actually being reported. I think I explained that right. But the numbers should have, if you have 40% of the cities not reporting, you should have a roughly 40% decrease in numbers over previous years where all the cities were reporting. That's not the case. We don't have a 40% reduction in crime. And so what you end up with is we have maybe, 13, 15, 20% reduction in crime. And yet some of the largest cities aren't being reported. That's not crime going down, folks. That's actual crime going up in terms of statistical analysis. But that's, of course, assuming that you can even trust these numbers, because you really can't, again. So, yeah, Joe Biden is not someone that we want back in the White House again. All right, couple last quick mentions or articles really quick. First of all, that whole thing about Dominion and the cases that are going on. We haven't heard a lot about those cases here recently. and mainly because they're kind of a non-starter at this point. But this, in the National Pulse, this should give you pause and make you think maybe there's a little bit more that we need to be investigating. So here in the National Pulse, Dominion machines are under scrutiny after hundreds of discrepancies detected in a primary. So the Dominion voting systems machines are used in Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico had a primary here recently, which produced a bunch of upset results. And according to election officials down there, some machines reported 0 votes for certain candidates or actually reversed certain count totals. Counts reported by the machines were also sometimes lower than the paper counts. The Jessica Padilla, interim president of Puerto Rico's Elections Commission, said, "The concern is that we obviously have elections in November, and we must provide the island not only with assurances that the machine produces a correct result, but also the result it produces is the same one that is reported." So, I mean, just even in a small use case, okay, very small use case, there's issues that are being called out here. Yeah. No offense, folks, but I wouldn't trust these guys, especially after some of the things that we saw where hackers were able to get into the machines and change vote totals and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah, this doesn't bode well for Dominion machines, by the way. Last little thing before we head off. The economy. Let me back out. So, the economy, they've been talking about how inflation is coming down. There was an expectation that the Fed was actually going to start dropping interest rates this year, and that things were going to kind of work themselves out, that, oh, yes, we don't need to worry about the inflationary cycle anymore, so on and so forth. And then the beginning of this year, we all of a sudden started seeing the inflation numbers start to tick up a little bit again, that they weren't actually dropping like the government has been telling us. And therefore, the Federal Reserve has just announced this in town hall, but they have just announced that they are not going to change interest rates. They announced this yesterday. It was going to leave interest rates unchanged, continuing a pause in lieu of actually cutting rates. Well, for those of you that don't understand this entire inflationary cycle and that kind of stuff, or maybe didn't grow up in the 80s era after a just disastrous end of the 70s under Carter. The thing about this is that the only tool that the Federal Reserve actually has in order to dry up the money supply, because that's exactly what inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. Meaning that the value of the dollar, which that's exactly what inflation is, the value of the dollar is less than what you see on the face. The higher inflation is, the lower your actual dollar is valued at. And so what's going on here is the only tool that the Fed actually has to try and curb the inflationary rates is to raise interest rates. Now, in the 80s, we saw double-digit inflation. We saw massively double-digit inflation rates at times, and it essentially worked to dry up the money supply that was being put out, and it eventually, it took time, but eventually it was able to make it so that we could have low interest rates and low inflation rates like we've enjoyed over the course of the last 40 years, roughly, since that time. Now, what's happening here is that we're starting to, again, get onto a cycle where we're spending all kinds of money and printing all kinds of money in the government. Now, government doesn't produce anything. Government can only give somebody something if it takes it from somebody else, which is exactly what it's doing. Biden is attempting to raise taxes so that he can then spend money, because of the fact that he doesn't understand the fact that when you lower taxes and boost the economy by lowering taxes and lowering regulation, you actually gain revenues in the tax stream. But all of that stuff falls on deaf ears when it comes to the Democrats. And so here we have the Federal Reserve basically saying, yeah, you know, the inflation isn't really going anywhere, so we're not really going to change anything in the interest rates. So unfortunately, what this is going to lead to realistically is a cycle of stagflation, which for those that have memories longer than just yesterday or even a month or two down the road, was exactly where we were under the Carter administration at the tail end of the 70s, which led to a Reagan victory in 1980. This doesn't bode well for the economy. It certainly doesn't bode well for Biden, and it definitely doesn't bode well for the American people. All right, folks, that's all I have for tonight. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, sign up for an account. It is free. And once you get in there, find and follow the American Perspective channel on Rumble. For those of you already in Rumble, hit that thumbs up. You can do the same thing on Facebook and share this video as well. Let's gain more exposure. I would love to see more followers and everything else as we go along. I will see you tomorrow night, 5 p.m., right back here on American Perspective. That's 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Flag Day. Make sure you put those flags out, folks. Fly those colors proudly for Flag Day. And also, I might have something special for President Donald Trump for tomorrow, because it is also his birthday. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your evening. Good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.